So I think I might pass over to Louis, if you can assist us with that, please. Who's there?
Yeah, sure. No problem. So we need to elect a chair, so we need a proposer. So do our members want to propose?
Can I propose Councillor Dennis Harburg, please?
Yep, sure. Thank you. And do we have a seconder?
Yes, I'll second that.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure if we need to vote because that is already a majority of voters. Councillor Dennis Harburg, you are now the chair.
I'm happy to accept that. Right. In that case, welcome everyone to this virtual meeting of the Licensing Subcommittee, which is being conducted with members and officers and members of the public at various locations, communicating via audio, video and online. There's also the opportunity for members of the public and the press to listen and view these proceedings. I'd like to now invite the committee member and scrutiny officer to explain how proceedings will work today and to confirm that members and officers are in attendance and that everyone could obviously see, hear and be heard. So I'll hand over to you, Louis.
Thank you very much, Chair. Please note that this meeting is being streamed live onto YouTube and recorded via Zoom. When your name is called, please indicate your attendance to confirm that you are present, can hear and be heard. Do we have Councillor Dennis Harburg?
Yes.
We do, good. Councillor Jean Green?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Simon Bloxham?
Yes.
Thank you. And Councillor Mike Rice?
I'm here.
Thank you. And our officers, Nurinata Kativu?
Present.
Thank you. Jasmine Jennings?
Yep, yeah.
That's all. And our applicants, objectors or representatives, we have Neil Burton.
Good morning. Yeah, I'm here.
Thank you. Paul Taylor. Paul, you're on mute.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me this time?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Jacqueline Burton.
Yes, I'm here too.
Thank you. Marion Watts.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. And Karen Watts.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you very much. The hearing preliminary, which details the arrangements for the hearing, has been uploaded to the internet as a supplement to the agenda. I will just run through this briefly. The subcommittee consists of 3 voting members with a 4th non-participating member listening to the hearing. In the event that a voting member loses connection, the hearing will adjourn until connection can be restored. If the adjournment exceeds 10 minutes, or it is apparent sooner that reconnection will not be possible, the 4th member will replace the absent member and become a voting member of the subcommittee. If a quorum of 3 members that have been present throughout the hearing is not possible, the hearing will be adjourned. In the event that the applicant loses connection, the hearing will adjourn until connection can be restored. If it becomes apparent that reconnection will not be possible, the hearing will be adjourned to a stated date. In the event that the responsible authority loses connection, the hearing will adjourn until connection can be restored. If it becomes apparent that reconnection will not be possible, the hearing will be adjourned to a stated date. If the responsible authority has completed their presentation and closing statement before losing connection, the chair may decide to continue with the hearing. The subcommittee will undertake their deliberations in private, and the aim is that they will return to announce their determination on the live stream. However, they will not wait until all parties are connected. A copy of the decision will be forwarded to all parties electronically as soon as practicable, and will be able to be viewed on the Council's YouTube recording of the meeting and uploaded to the Council's website. If, having retired, members believe that their deliberations for a decision will take too long, to avoid parties waiting, they may decide not to announce it live on the day. If this is the case, an announcement will be made to this effect and the meeting will be closed. The decision would be then be announced in writing within 5 working days of the meeting. Are there any questions before we start the meeting? Thank you. I will now hand over to the chair.
Thank you very much for that, Louis. So I want to quickly run through the hearing procedure for today. This should be included in your agenda packs, but what we're going to do first is to take legal advice, and our legal advisor will set out the matters for consideration during the course of today's hearing, and then we'll hear the licensing officer's reports. And if there's anything that the officer needs to add to their report, that will be presented here. And if there's any amendments to the hearing bundle, etc., we'll cover those off. And then if anyone has any questions for the licensing officer, I'll take those questions from people who we refer to here as other persons, which is basically anyone that's objecting to the application but is a normal resident as opposed to someone from the police, etc., etc. And then after we've had those questions, the applicant has their opportunity to ask questions of our licensing officer. From there, I will, and the subcommittee also asks questions. We will ask questions last after every person has spoken and presented evidence today. The applicant will then make their submission, and again, the other persons have the opportunity to ask questions, as do we. Then the other persons make their submissions with the usual round of questionings led by the applicant this time. We will then hear closing statements from both the applicant and the other persons. And the legal submissions will, at the end of this process, will tie everything up and recap any legal issues that we've come into contact with across the course of the hearing. After that, as Louise indicated, we will retire and make a decision on the matter. Okay, so if we're all happy and clear and feeling comfortable with how things are going to go, I shall pass over to Noirinetta to set out and provide the committee with her legal advice this morning.
Good morning, committee and members. As you're aware, having read the papers, the application is for a full variation of the premises license under Section 34 of the Licensing Act. The variation is to amend the existing layout plan to include the outdoor area to the rear of the property. There are no other amendments to the existing licensable activities and timings as proposed in this variation. When considering the application, members are to observe that they'll be looking at it from the looking at the 4 licensing objectives, which are, bear with me, I did have it ready and I lost my thread. Sorry. So they'll be looking at the license objectives, which are the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, prevention of public nuisance, and protection of children from harm. At the end of listening to the representations, the committees are to make the decision with the following options. They can either grant the application as made, grant the application with conditions or amendments, depending on the representations received and considered during the hearing, or to refuse the application. That is all I have to advise on now, but obviously following the representations, I will advise the committee further.
Can I ask Jasmine, as our licensing officer, to present her report, please?
Good morning, Chair. There are no amendments to the published report. However, I do have a number of comments relevant to today's hearing. You will have seen from the report that some of the representations have sections that have been redacted. A summary of the reasoning for the main redactions is included in the report at paragraphs 8.7 to 8.12. I remind all parties that any redacted information cannot be discussed at today's hearing, and any oral contributions from other persons must relate specifically to relevant areas of their representation or an expansion of those new points. New information not included in the written representation cannot be introduced during the hearing. For example, if the representation deals solely with the matters of public nuisance, the oral presentation cannot then cover other licensing objectives, such as the prevention of crime and disorder. The licensing process should determine how the use of the premises can be managed and what activities, if any, are appropriate in relation to the narrow consideration of the 4 licensing objectives. Any matters not relating to one of the licensing objectives are not relevant to today's hearing and must not be discussed or considered. The 2 licensing objectives raised in representations are the prevention of crime and disorder. This relates to matters of crime or disorder on or in the immediate vicinity of the premises which fall within the control of the license holder. Control should not be placed on the license holder for patrons beyond the immediate vicinity of the premises. We then have the prevention of public nuisance. This relates to nuisance coming from or associated with the premises and can cover matters of noise, light, litter, or odour. Examples are music or people noise coming from the premises, or noise nuisance directly associated with the premises, such as vehicle or people noise outside of the premises. As this is an application to vary the premises licence with no evidence of previous issues associated with the proposed use of the outdoor area by the current applicant, the subcommittee should consider whether the impact or likely impact on the licensing objectives of the proposed activities and timings. Members should be aware that there would be the right to review the licence in respect of any issues relating to the forward licensing objectives, should you be minded to grant a licence today. However, if you believe the likelihood of the adverse impact on the licensing objectives would be unreasonable to residents, you are entitled to reflect that in your decision today. The subcommittee is reminded that its determination today must be based on the specifics of this application and the proposed management team. The subcommittee must assess the application, operating schedule and oral submission of the applicant, and assess whether it believes this applicant can adequately promote the licensing objectives. Whilst the subcommittee should have regard to the fact that the application has satisfied the responsible authorities, the subcommittee is entitled to make further amendments to timings and conditions if it deems it appropriate to promote the licensing objectives based on the written and oral submissions. If the subcommittee is satisfied that there are no appropriate timings or conditions that will adequately promote the licensing objectives, it is entitled to refuse the application. I'm happy to answer any specific questions now or at any time during the hearing at your discretion, Chair.
Very much, Jasmine. So the first group of people I need to ask if they have questions for our licensing officer is the other person. So that's our residents who live close to Shea Burton. If you're able to use the raise hand button on Zoom or raise your physical hand, I'll take you in order if you have questions throughout today's proceedings. So any questions for the licensing officer? No? I'm not seeing any. Good. In that case, I will ask the applicant whether you have any questions for Jasmine at this stage.
Not at this stage, thank you.
No, lovely. And members of the subcommittee, do you have any questions?
No, thank you.
No, lovely. Thank you very much. Right, in that case, I shall move to the applicant and hear your opening submissions, please.
Is that me?
Yes, that will be you, Neil.
Apologies, we're very new to owning a restaurant, and we're certainly very new to this process. So we do apologise if we don't treat your process to the letter. Could I possibly share my screen? We recognise all of and fully respect all of the concerns that have been levelled. A lot of them based on issues relating to other licensed premises or issues related to the history of that area that's not part of this application, but we do fully respect it. But there's a lot of facts in those concerns that are incorrect, and because those, regarded of a lot of it being redacted, because those concerns are now a matter of public record, I'd like to address as much as we can those. Is it possible for me to share a screen here?
Potentially, depending on whether technology allows us to do that. Are you wanting to share items that were
Yeah.
in your submission, so the plans, etc.?
No, I'm asking to share what we are as a business, so you could make an informed decision on it. The host has disabled screen sharing, so I need the host, whoever the host is, to enable that.
Can I have a little bit of guidance, Norinetta? Are we allowed to consider that sort of outline of what the business is?
It would have been helpful if Mr. Burton had actually submitted it in advance, so we could have a look at it, just to check that there's nothing.
That wasn't part of the instructions given. Again, I apologise that we haven't done this before.
No, it's no problem. I think if you're able to, what we'll probably do is let you have the presentation if you can, and if there's anything that steers towards representations, that would not be part of that.
No, I understand.
Do that orally. If it's just sorry, I just noticed that Mr. Taylor's got his hand up.
I can see Mr. Taylor's got his hand up. I was waiting for this to finish. Okay, so I'll leave Louis and William to try and work out the technical aspects. If I feel uncomfortable with any content that's coming through, Neil, what I will do is sort of indicate and move you on to the next part. Paul.
I wish to object to that, because we're also very new to this whole thing, and especially the objecting to applications of extending licenses. And I think that's an unfair advantage on all us other people if Mr. Burton is allowed to introduce different aspects of his application.
These are
Thank
not
you.
different aspects.
Okay, I'm going to share the meeting.
It's new information.
So what we can do, if people have questions or concerns, rather than arguing across screens,
Yeah.
if you can, we can have the conversations through me, and I'll try to mediate things. We've had legal advice, and I think what the position is that we will allow an outline of what the business is doing, because obviously that is something that's set out briefly within the formal context of the licensing application. But if it is felt that the presentation is veering beyond matters that are relevant to this particular licensing hearing, just the same as if objectors to the application started to veer into territory that's not relevant or has been redacted, I will close down those conversations and we will deal with things fairly. And this committee is only going to make a determination on the basis of the evidence that has been presented here and that is relevant to the specific licensing objectives. And we will do our best to make sure that everybody's treated fairly and everyone gets a fair hearing. So, quick question to officers. Are we able to allow screen sharing? Have you figured that out for us?
Yes. Oh, sorry. Go on, Will.
Sorry, no, go for it, Louis.
Well, Will, you need to give Neil a co-host, I think, of the meeting for him to be able to share his screen.
Alternatively, I'm going to press button here, and Mr. Burton, can you tell me if you now have the option to share your screen?
Yes, I do, yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
In that case, Mr. Burton, would you like to proceed with your presentation? And if I'm not comfortable with where it's going, I will stop you.
Yeah,
okay?
understood.
Thank you.
I will have to log back in again, but that's shouldn't be a problem. That's quicker than I thought. Can you hear me again?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
And I can see your screen. Is everyone else able to see Mr. Burton's screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So again, just with the sum of what we believe to be misunderstandings in the facts in mind, I just wanted to run through some of the background context of why we're applying for the license that we are. We are not a pub. A lot of the comments and concerns, right concerns associated with the residents in that area relate to us potentially mimicking other pubs in the area. We are not a pub, we are a fine dining restaurant. We offer exquisite small plates of food, similar in tapas. We've been open for 7 months. Our clients make reservations to come to us. Our clients don't stand up and drink. The license that we're applying for relates to a restaurant business, bookings only, and our demographic, again, relating to some of the concerns that we've had. Our demographic are people from 45 years to mid to late 60s, high worth individuals that are wanting a quality experience. We don't sell draft beer, for example. We don't sell cheap spirits. We don't do meal deals. We don't have children. We don't cater for children in our business. To give you an idea of what the license extension is going to relate to in terms of our brand, we have an expensive quality brand in a restaurant style. Just also and again, a lot of the concerns related to our disregard of neighborhood because of a seek for profit. We are not a business. We are not a for-profit business. We're a family-run restaurant. We live we are neighbors of other people. and that the principles of being a good neighbour as us as a family are no different to what Shea Burton as our restaurant wants. We've got some of the comments that we saw within the concerns related to a seeking profit at the expense of local residents' health and well-being. We are not that kind of business. Yeah, it's a personal project that Jackie and I have. We have day jobs. Where I'm away from home on my day job at the moment. This for us is just an opportunity to open a restaurant and fulfil a personal agenda. Hertfordshire has been very supportive of us. Yeah, Hertfordshire Life, Absolute Hertfordshire, have recognised that we have brought an experience to North Herts that hasn't been there before. A comment that they made was a breath of fresh air to North Hertfordshire. So in the very few months that we've been open, with all good intent for the local community and our neighbours, we feel that we have done a very, very good positive service to the local community. And I just wanted to make that clear in terms of our licensing objectives. Some of the licensing objectives have related to, some of the concerns to our licensing application have related to the derelict nature of the back of the garden. This gives you an idea of the back garden of the restaurant. We've been open for 7 months. This has been it, and this for us wants to be turned into this. So we really want to get rid of a part of our building that has got some very health concerns, fire concerns. Everything's fallen in. And re-landscape it and use it to something like this, which is a very quiet, very intimate extension to the inside of the business. What I would like to just address as well, because again there was some concerns associated with fire risk and hazard, and also concerns related to the property, the neighbour upstairs. The landscaping of the back of this garden will adhere to all fire and health regulations. Everything has been planned, checked, and approved for that, and also the concerns over a neighbour. And I'll come to the next slide, which is one of the objectors' photos actually, because I think it really helps picture what the concerns are. The neighbour who lives upstairs is our landlord. So the concerns that some of the objections raise around access to the neighbour, for the neighbour who goes to his house, I don't know whether you can see my cursor screen around, who gets to his house through these steps, that is our landlord. And everything that we have done and planned has been in full support and agreement of the landlord, who not only owns that property, but owns the other restaurants and the flats above other properties as well. So the concern around access from the neighbour, it shouldn't be there, because the neighbour is our landlord and the neighbour is in full concert with these plans. Just to put some facts around it, because again, some of the facts in the concerns were wrong. So we do not open 7 days a week. We currently open Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday evenings. Our license that we inherited from the previous business is a 7-day-a-week license. We have no plans to open 7 days a week. The garden in itself, again, is not planned to be open more than 2 or 3 days a week. So there's a lot of duplications in the concerns, and quite rightly so, if someone was going to open another pub 7 days a week close to someone's house, I would fully expect it. But we are not a 7 day a week restaurant. Currently 4 days, garden will probably 2 or 3 days. The licensing hours, and there was a slight, I had a slight point of clarity on the licensing description. All we want to do is to be able to sell alcohol at the same time that we sell food, and our kitchen closes at 10. We'd like to be able to sell alcohol up until the point that we don't sell food, which is 10 p.m, and make sure that all customers have gone and that area is cleaned and locked by 11, which is a concession on what our current licensing hours are already, which I was happy to make. Just in terms of the pictures, and I thank Karen and Robin Watts of 2 Maltings Court for this photo, because I've used it here. Although it's factually incorrect, I do appreciate them hanging out of their bathroom window to take this one, because it does illustrate the area of concern. On the left-hand side, again, this photo was provided by one of the individuals that had concerns. It suggests this red area is the garden area that we are talking about. It's incorrect. It's this area. This area actually belongs to the restaurant round the corner, Piatto, and it's their shed. So our garden is this. You can see from that, the chip shop, which runs along here, kind of extends there. So there is an overlap between our garden and these houses here, most of which these houses have been where the concerns come from. I would also bring to attention the proximity of here. This is the garden of the White Lion pub. So the garden of the White Lion pub is just next to those houses, and we are away from these houses here. A point of note, that's been a pub since 1839. That was a pub before these were built, and presumably before anyone ever lived there. So just as a point of record, these homes are next to a pub in a busy high street already. And
I'll accept that, but I'm not necessarily going to dwell or direct the subcommittee to think too much about comparing Shayburton with other businesses in the area.
I thank you for that, and recognise that is my actual point. A lot of the facts in the concerns are effectively, if there's issues with the properties or the restaurants or the pubs around there, it does feel as if the objections have taken Shayburton and put it into the same mix. I can't be responsible for somebody else's licensing laws or whether they've got drunk or loud people in their garden. Just to add to that, these are not homes, that's the shed of a pub. And also just to highlight the point around the neighbour that was cited as one of the objections. This is the residence of our landlord who lives upstairs. Just coming to the right-hand side, I'll just move your faces out of the way. Coming to the right-hand side of that, this is a good illustration of the area that's being discussed. This is our garden. From that tree there back to there is the area that we're asking for the license to be extended to. This area here is another restaurant. This courtyard that has been citing in much of the objections is a car park, and the gate or the gangway to the front doors here. So again, I'd just like to point out that the other side of this house is actually in a pub garden. We are further away from these houses than other licensed premises, but that is the area that we're discussing now. And just to consolidate, and I'll go through, and because I do want to address the individuals' concerns that have been raised, because I think out of respect to them, whether the facts are correct or not, I would like to be respectful to their concerns. If you consolidate some of these concerns, the consolidation effectively is general noise and general smells. The privacy and light seem to be the summary of the concerns that we have. If I just address those in order, David and Stephanie Taylor of 3 Maltings Court talk about the proximity of their property to our property from that photo. The proximity of their property to the White Lion is significantly closer, and it is a busy town with multiple pubs. And David and Stephanie of 3 Maltings Court also talk about a 6-day a week until 11:30. Sorry, a 6-day a week license till midnight and 11:30 on Sunday. Again, already addressed. We are not 6 days a week till 12 and 1 day to 11:30. We open 4 evenings a week. I won't go into addressing things that don't necessarily have anything to Shea Burton, despite the fact they weren't redacted in the document. If there has been unsocial behaviour, for example, very late at night, that is nothing to do that is nothing to do with our restaurant. I do take personal offence to being accused that no consideration was made of our neighbours, because that's not us. We have every consideration for our neighbours, where we live and where our business is. Sophie Lowry of 2 Maltings Court, that's the same address as Paul and Robin, who was also on the thing, raised many concerns on that in a very long and emotional, very interesting response. And I will address each one of those, because again, Sophie deserves the respect for me to address those. She spoke around the extension into a derelict area that her neighbours move around with. I've already mentioned the neighbour that she is referring to is our landlord, is in full agreement and support of our plans. She also mentions fire regulations and an increase in fire risk. All fire regulations have been considered and passed. She also mentions that our disregard for people's health and wealth based on just for the sake of profit. I won't go into that details, but that is quite saddening and offensive to us. This is not about profit. But she does go on to consider smoke as well. She mentions if people are permitted to smoke in Shea Burton's garden area, they are up at a fire risk, which isn't the case. But she also mentions smoke that could be people smoke added to the smell of hot oil from a chip shop on one side and hot and barbecue smells from a restaurant on the other side. Again, I'll remind you, that's nothing to do with Shea Burton. But we have taken that into account.
Can I please object to this? This is going on and on and on, and we're not allowed to make comments to other people.
Mr. Taylor,
yes.
Just as you will be allowed to make your representations and submissions, Mr. Burton, as the applicant, is also entitled to do that. And in my view, what he's presenting adds value, because he's not merely reciting what is in his application. He's actually layering additional detail in there and helping the committee in determining evidence and thinking about things. And he's actually showing that he's considered what the objectors have said. And that's quite key as well, bearing in mind some of the objectors to this application have determined that they don't need to be present because their concerns have been addressed by what Shea Burton has done. So I think it is important and it is relevant. There's no time limit on this type of hearing and presentations, and we do try to run these, informally and make sure that everybody does get a fair hearing. In fact, if we were not to allow people to have a fair hearing, we'd be opening ourselves up to rights of appeal. And equally, I think if Mr. Burton were to cut you off while you were explaining things, you might take some respectable offence to that. So I will allow Mr. Burton to continue, and I do believe he is wrapping up, and this is potentially one of his final points that he will be making, working through these objections and setting out for all of us here his case, as I fully expect, Mr. Taylor, you will do at your time. So, Mr. Burton, may I ask you to continue, please?
Thank you. Thank you. With that, I'll go back there because I've kind of been interrupted, but the concern that Sophie has around smoke, so the effects of cigarette smoke combined with smells from a chip shop and barbecue smells from a restaurant, we'll take that into account, and we will allocate a smoking only area in the garden of Shea Burton that is as far away from any of the properties as possible, which will probably be in the back left-hand side of the garden. Again, there was some duplication of accusations around closing 6 nights a week at midnight. That is incorrect. We've addressed that already. There was also an objection around guests leaving late. We've gone back and we have checked through our CCTV cameras and our till processes. 82% of our guests have left the inside of the restaurant by 11:30. So the extension to outside, and bearing in mind we will close sales of food and alcohol at 10, and the garden will be empty and clean by 11, is supporting the data inside. There's some points around being inconsiderate and disrespectful, which we'll move on. Oh, there was also a comment around rats in that area, which has been, it was before we took.
Yes, and I think we can move that one on as well, because that's environmental health.
Yeah, that has been addressed. And there was concerns from her around privacy. Now, just to give an idea, the fencing, the walls around the garden will be 2 meters high. The windows associated with the bedrooms are on the 3rd floor, so there will be no invasion of privacy unless we have any freakishly tall 4 meter high customers in the garden. But there wouldn't be any, in my opinion, any effects of privacy. The windows are 3 stories higher than the garden, so that Sophie can be assured that she wouldn't be overlooked when she was putting her dinner on or her undies in the dryer. There was another request that we could use the front of the restaurant for licensed outdoor food and drink rather than the back. We have got a pavement license. We applied for that last year. To do that, we missed the opportunity to try that out because we came to the end of the summer. But just to put into context, the front of our restaurant is a zebra crossing. The front of the properties across the rest of the high street don't have a zebra crossing in front of them. So although we have a pavement license, we can't really use it because there is a zebra crossing there. Just gradually going through this, so I won't duplicate concerns that I've already addressed, if you mind. So Paul Taylor, again, there was some concerns around the licensing hours and the numbers of days. Paul, I hope I've addressed that. I can't address the fact that diners may be laughing in the garden. I certainly hope they will be, but in terms of disturbance and hours, I think we've already addressed that. And I'm just scanning through to see if there's a concern on a couple of the submissions around light pollution. We haven't defined lighting in the garden yet. We could have showed any of the people that objected our plans to date. Lighting will be a low-level lighting. It's not a football stadium. It will be low-level lighting around the bottom of the fences.
I think that might be something that potentially crosses into planning as well. So that's not necessarily an item for this subcommittee.
Yeah, and I think that is really about it. In terms, I'm trying to address every person's concerns, and to this point, the concerns seem to be around noise, late at night at 7 days a week. I hope I've addressed that. Smells, I can't really do much about another restaurant's barbecue and a chip shop, but we will move the cigarette, the smoking area in the garden to the least impactful area. Privacy, I can't build fences higher than 2 meters, but the windows of those properties are 3 stories anyway. And light, I will just plan to have low level lighting in that area. And that really, and I've just been tuned into, and you guys, the panel know these better than I. In terms of drawing attention to, we have the ability to eat outside anyway without food. I'd rather not do that because it just doesn't deliver the same Shea Burton experience to our customers. But we do have the ability to consume food and to do all this without the ability to sell a glass of wine with it anyway. So what my last kind of slide on this is we disagree with many of the accusations and the assumptions, but we do respect the concerns of our neighbours. We do recognise and acknowledge that we are in the middle of a busy and vibrant high street. There has been a busy and vibrant high street with pubs there for hundreds of years, and we have made a concession on the timings that was requested by our neighbours. And we are, hopefully, you'll agree, we are trying to go out of our way to be respectful of our neighbours and to protect the privacy and the disturbance as much as we can. And that is all I needed to say, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Neil. That was extremely helpful, and I'm sure there'll be a number of questions. So before we move into the question phase, what I need to make clear is that this isn't a space to make your submissions in advance or have a crack at doing 2 sets of submissions. The questions that I will be taking, both from other persons and members of the panel, will be questions of fact. So if you need facts clarifying by Mr. Burton from his submissions here, now is the opportunity to do that. So can I ask then any of the residents, do you have questions of fact for Mr. Burton? And I will take them fastest finger first on the electronic or physical hands. Mr. Taylor's raising a hand already. Yes.
Am I not muted? I'm okay, am I?
We can hear you.
You're okay.
Fine, thank you. I'd like to know why he dismisses the whole housing area of the Maltings. I mean, the Maltings was developed over 40 years ago, and I'm the owner of it. And I've worked there for 30 years as well. So I've seen the changes within that area. And the design of the buildings was to have minimum number of windows on the pub side because it was a pub and it was a garden. So all the windows, with council permission, was granted that they should all look out. All right, the bedroom windows are in the roof, but the main living accommodation is level with the top of the wall and the fence. So your dining room and your kitchen is directly looking over onto that garden. And that was the way it was designed. Mr. Burton seems to think that there is no issue on privacy. There is an issue on privacy. People that live in the houses are going to be walking backwards and forwards past these windows, of which the bay windows are only 4 meters from the wall. And people will be able to look in, and they won't be able to have their windows open because people will be talking and they'll be viewing all the time. With regard to the number of people in the actual garden.
Sorry, a question there. I'm just conscious that I need to answer your question.
Okay.
This is okay. I'm going to let Mr. Taylor continue. And why I've got my notepad and pen is I can hear the question in effectively what is a submission. So I'll record those and I'll try and assist both of you.
Okay. So it's difficult to understand why Mr. Burton has gone into so much detail to give out what he's doing, but he doesn't tell us how many people will be in the garden. I mean, the size of his restaurant, he has 25, 27 covers, and the garden area is much larger than that. So we can only assume on the same ratio that he's going to have sort of 30 to 35. That's quite a volume of people. And if the volume is going to increase the noise level, without a doubt. And my personal feeling is that alcohol is a fuel for people to get louder as the night goes on.
That was cheeky. We are definitely crossing into submission territory. So, Mr. Taylor, I'm gonna cut you off there. I've heard a couple of questions in there though, Mr. Burton. So I'm gonna try and summarize.
Well, thank you for your help. I'm not good at this, so.
No, that's absolutely fine. That's why we're here, because we recognise that obviously a lot of the time it is just normal people that comes to these hearings on
Yes.
both sides. So I heard in Mr. Taylor's sort of speech there a concern around what sort of sound screening measures are going to be put in place to assist the residents who do have windows facing out and do have a need to open those windows during the day, because increased sound in that area could cause them nuisance, which links into our licensing objective. So if you could reflect and perhaps feedback any considerations and facts around mitigation of noise nuisance. And also, I think the other pertinent question that isn't clear to me from the applicant's pack is how many people are going to be present in that garden. And again, this speaks to the prevention of nuisance licensing objective. So could you give us the facts on that, please, Mr. Burton?
Yeah, the two questions I heard, it was not necessarily around sound protection, but the privacy of looking into windows, if that's correct.
No, I don't think overlooking is an issue, because the windows are higher. It's
so that's what in my head.
Any smells lifting up.
Yeah, so the windows on the second floor of those houses are higher than the fence that we've got in place. Is that right? But
no, it's on the same level.
So if anyone is taller than 2 meters, they could be looking into a window. Is that what we're saying? I believe the windows are above the level of the level of the fence. So if there's any like in anything else, if there's anyone looking into windows, you're looking up. You're looking up through a window to the ceiling of the person indoors. I can't, unless I build 4-meter fences, I can't see how that's ever going to be addressed. In terms of the noise, again, I will build strong and high enough fences to mitigate as much noise as we can. I don't know what there is to any more that we can do on that. With regards to the amount of people, your assumption of 35 people in the garden is incorrect. We have designed it. I put the slide up which had tables on it. There's probably tables for 18 people. I don't know how many people are going to use the garden, because we're new to being a restaurateur. Again, it's not a beer garden. It will be table serviced, and we've put 2 tables of 2, tables of 4s, tables of 2s around that design. We have only 18 chairs on the design. Difficult to say how many people are going to use it, because we've never owned a restaurant before. But that's the kind of the numbers. And you're right. The inside restaurant has covers for 26, 28. Has 26 in the front. It has 8 in the middle. So 34 people inside.
Very much. I think that sort of picks up the questions of fact that there were in there, and we're not straying too much into opinion. Do any other of the residents have questions of fact for Mr. Burton? Yes, Miss Watts.
Oh, sorry about that. Yes, I just wanted to know, the kitchen shuts at 10 p.m, but customers can still sit outside till 11 p.m, which is still quite very late. It's still late. We still, particularly on a hot day when we have to have our windows open, we all get up early, very early in the morning. That does concern me. And also I'd like to know what days Mr. Burton's planning on opening. I mean, is it during the week? Is it weekends? Are those days going to be varied, from season to season, that sort of thing. And also on another note, I'm sorry if I'm overstepping the line here, but Mr. Burton mentions that he doesn't have children in the restaurant. I have been in his restaurant, which I have to say is it's a lovely restaurant and great food. And there were children in there at the time. And he also makes a point of saying that a lot of his clientele are middle-aged. Well, you know, on social media, I've seen pictures of people much younger, 30s, you know, age shouldn't really come into it. And when alcohol's involved, we all get a bit leery sometimes, and it happens. So that is my concern, it does worry me about my health and well-being, our health and well-being on those days when it goes on till 11 p.m, which I do feel is a bit late. Is there any way that could be, you know, made a bit earlier, you know, when the kitchen shuts, the garden shuts?
I'd like a little assistance from Jasmine at this point. Does the garden under the variation have to be clear by 10 o'clock?
Yeah, that's correct. We did agree to a condition whereby patrons would be out of the garden by 10 p.m.
Okay, so
that is my fault. Sorry, Chair, to interrupt. For my fault is only when I read that I've realised we may have said the wrong things, or I may have agreed to the wrong things. I agreed to that when I thought that was a concession that everyone would be accepting of. Clearly, that concession was declined by everyone. In the thought process that I had once I read it, we serve food till 10, and so I would like to serve alcohol till 10, and between 10 and 11, that garden will be emptied and cleaned. So from 10 o'clock it will be just to answer your question. So sorry, that in terms of the timing, the garden will be empty and cleaned and locked up by 11.
10. Was that going to be 10?
So service stops. What Mr. Burton is saying, service will stop at 10 for food and alcohol, and the garden will be clear by 11.
Correct.
That's still very late.
The condition had been accepted already onto the license. Jasmine, can you clarify exactly what we're looking at today?
Yeah, bear with me 1 second.
If I can assist Jasmine, the condition that was proposed by the applicant was that he will ensure the outdoor area is not used by patrons after 10 o'clock, and it will be cleared off by patrons by this time.
That is exactly the condition we agreed.
Yeah.
But actually, Mr. Burton, I do understand. However, we did have, I think, 4 objections withdrew on the basis of that condition being agreed. So we can't really accept that you just take it back.
Okay.
So my understanding is that is the condition that's agreed and is attached and is part of the application that we're considering.
Correct.
Which I don't know if an applicant can, at this stage in a hearing process, seek to withdraw a condition that's a fundamental part of what we're considering.
No, they cannot.
No. So that condition stands. So to answer Ms. Watt's question, the garden will be clear by 10. And I guess if Shea Burton chooses to, at some point in the future, to want the garden to be open for longer, you would need to submit the licence for review to have that condition removed.
Can I just add to that? What happens, for example, if somebody comes into the restaurant at, say, 10:15, buys a bottle of wine and insists that they sit outside? I mean, staff might not want to go and say to that person, I'm sorry, it's 10 o'clock, you'll have to come back inside. You know, what guarantees to me, 10 p.m. is still quite late. Mr. Burton hasn't answered my questions about what days he plans to be open. Are they going to be set days, or is this going to be is this going to be changing around according to the season?
So I hear what's being said there in respect of the hypothetical. I'm not the kind of person that tends to enjoy dealing with and dwelling on the hypotheticals, because we would be here all day, wouldn't we?
Of course. Yeah.
So I'll park that one, other than to say the garden under this application will close at 10 and be cleared at 10. So anything after that time would be dealt with within the restaurant and within the existing terms of the license. There was a second point in there, which is a question that I have on my list to ask, which is around clarifying and essentially fixing the days that the venue will open and will serve. So I guess what I would like to take from Ms. Watch's questioning here is link that into my question that I have for you, Mr. Burton, which is, can we agree fixed opening days and have those attached to the license as a condition, as opposed to having the grandfather rights of the license to open 7 days a week if you so choose?
The timings, I will, just going back to the two questions, the timings I will have to adhere to. If the council either do not agree to appoint the license as I've applied for it, or deny the license completely, and the only other option, if I remember correctly, was the concessional one in the middle, the 10 o'clock. If the council decide to approve that one, I will stand by it. If we find that has problems, to your point, Karen, around if someone's coming in and at 9:45 and then hanging onto a bottle of wine for the next hour, well, I'll have to either address that with a different submission. In terms of the days, at the moment we open 4 days a week, and the garden we expect to open Friday, Saturday, not Sunday. But I will not be. That will be my decision. I'm asking for the license to allow me to open on the same day in the garden on the same days that we have a license for in the restaurant.
So which day?
So separating what my license application is from what I personally expect, and Jackie, my wife, can keep me honest on this. We probably expect a Friday and Saturday in the garden, maybe a Wednesday lunchtime, because it's the market, it's the Bulldog market. We have no expectations or intentions of opening 7 days a week, 365 days of the year.
Okay,
that's not what we do.
Remind me, if you would, are you currently open Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or Wednesday through Saturday?
I'll be clear for everyone. We are currently open Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday evening only.
Okay.
We have no intentions at the moment, or certainly, and I'm not saying that because tomorrow I may change my mind, we have no intentions of opening any other days than that. With regards to the garden, we have expectations to open on a Friday or a Saturday lunchtime. Okay. Maybe a Wednesday if Bulldog would suffice it. The reason we wouldn't, it just doesn't make it's not financially viable to. We'd have to have staff standing around with no people. But just to be clear, that my license is an extension of the area, not that, I don't want to be bound by not being able to make decisions on the licensing days.
Okay.
But we need some clarification. We need to know what days you're going to be open. And may I ask, if you're going to start opening at lunchtime, how long during the day you're going to open? Because some of us work from home as well. So that again will be a lot of noise added to that.
May I just butt in? Sorry, Chair. There's already a license for them to open 7 days a week. That's for the actual restaurant. All we're considering today is the outdoor area. So if the questions are being asked of the representatives, they need to focus their questions on the outdoor area, because there's already a license for the actual premises.
No, I understand that. I think what I was getting at is doing one of the functions that we can perform at this committee is we can come up with and agree conditions to be attached to the license with the applicant, which take into account the concerns that we're hearing from objectors. So what I'm looking to do here is perhaps take into consideration certainly some of Karen's point around, we don't know when things are going to be open, we don't know when trading is going to be taking place, and if we are able to agree with Mr. Burton that trading will only take place 4 days a week, if we can fix those 4 days formally as a condition, fantastic. If we can't and it's still a loose condition, then that's better than nothing. But I think what I'm hearing from Mr. Burton is he's not minded to agree any kind of condition that is going to restrict his flexibility to pick and choose when he trades at this point in time. So I think I'm minded to drop my line of questioning that I've piggybacked into the objectors section of this, and I will move on. I can see Mike's raised a hand. I'm going to hold you, Mike, and see whether any of the other objectors have got any questions of fact for Mr. Burton on his application. Yes, Mr. Taylor. You're on mute.
You're on mute.
Sorry, I'm not used to this.
That's okay.
And it is rented out. At the moment, the lady that lives in number 4 has a daughter that suffers with autism, and she's very upset easily by disruptions around her. And,
I need to jump in, Mr. I know that you're
sorry?
advocating and you're passionate about protecting and looking after everyone there. But if an individual resident has a concern about a licensing application, we need them to be present here and to make their own case. I don't think that you've been elected or there's any sort of formality that would allow me to take you as acting as an advocate for these people. I hear
right.
what you're saying and I appreciate it, but I don't think I can allow it.
Can I just say then that it's very difficult because it was only advertised in the paper. With planning application, near neighbours get notification of these things, and both neighbours did not become aware of this until after I'd phoned them and said, did they make any representation to the licensing authority? And they both said no, they were unaware. And so I feel they've been let down in the system somehow.
What I'm hearing here then is a complaint against council process and whether or not we followed what we should have done. So with utmost respect, that needs to be dealt with outside of this hearing and ought to be run through via our formal complaints process as an organisation. And I'm certain officers have heard what you said. And if there is a failing in the process that we are legally required to follow, they will pick it up and make sure that it's not repeated in future. This is the opportunity to ask questions of fact to Mr. Burton about the application. I'm aware you've already asked some questions, so I'm going to ask any of the other objectors if you have any further questions for Mr. Burton before I move on to the panel. No, I'm not seeing any indications, so I shall move to Councillor Mike Rice.
Thank you, Chair. Before I pass a question to Mr. Burton, could I get some clarification from our legal officer, please? That we are only talking about being able for alcohol to be consumed in the garden. It's not being sold in the garden, it's being sold on the premises and consumed in the garden. If no alcohol was being consumed in the garden, then you don't actually need a license to be able to redo the garden or eat in the garden. Am I correct?
Correct. Licensable activity is the sale and consumption of alcohol.
So exactly what we're looking at here is whether alcohol can be consumed in the garden and when, therefore, by the amount of days or the time that it can be consumed in the garden. I mean, we're talking about having the garden clear by 10 o'clock. Can we legally do that if there's no alcohol in the garden?
We have asked, sorry, the applicant has agreed to that on the basis of the license objectives, which would be to deal with the prevention of noise and nuisance. So we can do it under that license objective, as is the application that's before us. So we've got time to, we have the right to consider conditions to assist the neighbouring, the neighbours in the area, and that's what we've asked. And obviously the applicant has agreed, as he is trying to obviously run his business, but then consider the objections of the residents locally.
Yeah, what I was trying to ascertain here, of course, is if there's no alcohol in the garden, he can use the garden up until you need a late dining license. So it's 11 o'clock.
Correct. Yes.
So people can eat in that garden up till 11 o'clock at night without him getting the license if no alcohol is consumed in the garden.
That is correct, but I think obviously that is unlicensable until after 11, which is why he's put the application for the alcohol, which is why we're now making the restriction for the time based on the representation.
Okay, so he's not applying for a late dining license then there?
No, it's merely the alcohol, and in fact, I
It's
think
merely
the
the
condition
alcohol.
that's been
Brilliant.
submitted in advance of this hearing restricts even the unlicensed aspect of that and cuts it off earlier. Then in law he would be entitled to continue doing that. So, right.
my question for Neil then is he happy for us to condition that garden to only be open Wednesday, Thursday, Friday and Saturday for the use of alcohol?
Can you hear me, Mike?
Yes, I can now.
No is the answer. Yeah, I would like my license dates that are currently in place to allow me to open whenever I like. I am telling you that my expectations is only to be, but in terms of licensing, it does seem as if, and to your previous point, is quite insightful to me, and maybe I should have taken what legal representation is. I didn't need any license to eat until 11 o'clock and create smells, noise, privacy concerns. I didn't need any of that if there wasn't alcohol involved. And
Correct.
It does seem now that by agreeing to a 10 p.m. empty, which is fundamentally, you're asking me to agree to a 9 p.m. selling alcohol time, effectively is reducing my ability to use that garden for non-licensable activities like eating. So I'm kind of considering if even by making the application, if I kind of painted myself into a bit of a corner on this. Because if I get the legal representative's comments correctly, by applying an alcohol license at 10 o'clock, effectively I have hard-lined my ability to sell non-alcohol and food to that time level. Is that correct?
No, I don't quite see it like that, but I understand what you're saying. You're saying that a condition of 10 p.m, which you've agreed to, which is why you've had objectors obviously step away from this because they're happy to think that everything's going to be clear by 10 o'clock. It's only alcohol that we're talking about.
Mm.
I mean, people can be in your garden, if I understand it correctly, until 11 o'clock, which has got nothing to do with the licensing laws if they haven't got any alcohol.
Could I get that point clarified by...
Yeah, could we check the exact wording of the condition that was agreed, please?
The condition that was agreed by the applicant was that that he would ensure the outdoor area is not used by patrons after 2200 hours, and it will be cleared off by patrons by that time.
Okay, so I think that's clear and unambiguous. It's not used, which means there is no usage for food or alcohol beyond 10 o'clock, which means everybody will be cleared, at 10 o'clock.
Yeah, but excuse me, Chair, he doesn't need a licence for food until after 11 o'clock.
So the use of all activities then, Noranetta, does that cover literally any use of that garden? So it's effectively an agreed restriction on the statutory position.
So there is a statutory position. However, if he's agreeing to this, he's agreeing irrespective of the statutory provision that everything will be cleared by 10.
Does that answer it for you, Mike?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the condition as it stands. And I will remind everyone that when we go into deliberation, members of this subcommittee can decide and determine that certain conditions ought to be applied to this licence in order to achieve our licensing objectives. So it's not necessary for us to agree conditions in this space, although obviously that can be helpful and beneficial. And equally, if anybody is unhappy with the outcome of today's hearing, there is a right to review, and the licence can be brought back to be reviewed at a future date as well. So Councillor Bloxham, did you have any questions of fact for Mr. Burton?
No, I didn't. I did think I had one question, but that's been covered. I think that's quite a very restrictive concession. that Mr. Burton's put in there, because I think reading that now, that is to stop everything by 10 o'clock, I think is, very restrictive.
And that is just in the outside area again.
Yeah,
Obviously
absolutely. Yeah.
The restaurant, as I understand it, is not affected by this restriction to the statutory position. So the restaurant can continue to trade. It's just the outside won't.
Yeah. My query was on that. It was really what Mike Rice was saying about the use of the area, but this restriction there in preventing the use of it from 10 o'clock, I think it covers a lot of things.
Yeah, lovely. I can see that Mrs. Burton has raised a hand. I wouldn't necessarily normally take additional questions or queries, but as I think you're representing the applicant jointly, give me a little bit of fact, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. So with regard to the timings, the committee can make their decision not to accept that 10 o'clock cutoff. So if the committee feel that the 10 o'clock cutoff is unfair, you could, in theory, grant us the license until 11. Is that?
So I think that condition was actually agreed before it came here. So we're considering the license with that condition that was agreed before here. But equally, if we're not happy with various aspects of the application, we can edit, amend, impose conditions, or ultimately say we don't agree with any of it and we're going to kick the whole lot back. So that's how we work. And we'll weigh everything up based on the evidence that we've heard today and what's in the pack when we go into deliberation.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's fine.
Lovely. So I don't think I have any further questions, and I don't think members of the panel do either, in which case I shall move to these things we have called other persons, i.e. the residents who are joining us and objecting today, to make their representations. Have you elected a chair, or are you just sort of going to go individually? No. Okay, in that case, I think Mr. Taylor has been acting and doing the majority of submissions, so I shall turn to Mr. Taylor if you'd like to make your submissions for us first.
Can I just make one point of clarification? There is a bar marked in the garden on the drawings that Mr. Burton has submitted, and the last councillor was suggesting that the drinks would be taken from the inside out, but there is a separate bar in the garden. Does that make any difference?
I don't think that that's relevant, because what we're considering here is the operating hours and the license that's being applied for and the conditions, and then also obviously the licensing objectives, nuisance, etc. And if the entire area is going to be clear, clearly the bar is going to stop serving prior to 10 o'clock.
Right.
So did you have a formal submission that you want to take here? I generally tend to say to everyone, please try and avoid reading from the emails and what we've already had verbatim, and rather try and build and to really give us a clear picture of what it is that concerns you the most.
Right, I personally disagree with some of the comments that Mr. Burton's made about the smelly, noisy fish shop. I mean, I've owned the property for 40 years and I ran a restaurant with 60 covers, and I closed at 9 o'clock, and that was internally, because I tend to think that alcohol and people are not the best mix. And the more alcohol people consume, the greater the noise. And when it's outside, there is no means of restricting the noise to go beyond barriers of boundaries and fences. And the same with the lighting. I don't think Mr. Burton has put very much detail into the lighting, and so I'm not particularly pleased about that. It is basically the noise and the nuisance that residents are going to be subjected to. We now have this suggestion that it might only be open 3 to 4 days a week, but if the license is granted for 7 days, anybody could continue to use that. And what we've been told is pointless, really. So I would still like to think that it'd be kept to 10 o'clock if that's the compromise. And there's no point going on about the other things, because I don't think you're going to consider them to be relevant. So thank you. That's my lot.
Okay, I'll try and prompt. If the other things are bits that the officers have redacted in the packs that have been published, then no, we won't be considering them. Equally, I'm going to direct the panel not to consider comments around your past restaurant experience and other venues, etc., because that's not relevant. But the points on noise nuisance, and potentially lighting nuisance, depending whatever happens with planning applications, are potentially relevant considerations in this area. So if you had additional detail on that, I'm happy to allow it. If not, I will move to anyone that wishes to ask you questions of fact. No. Okay. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Taylor? Nope. Lovely. Okay, in that case, I shall ask next. Karen, did you want to sort of make any submissions here?
Sorry, I'm new to this myself, and I'm just worried that I'm going to say something that
it's fine. Like, I will treat everybody fairly and hold everyone's hand through a process. And if I think things are going the wrong way, I'll get you back on track.
Yeah, it's sorry, I'm getting a bit emotional about this. I mean, I appreciate that Mr. Burton wants to keep his business, but his business has been doing fantastically the last year. You know, I read social media, I read what posts they put on, and it's just upsetting as a resident to know that that our, you know, I suffer with migraines myself, and the thought of not being able to go to bed early. I don't know if I'm allowed to mention the pub next door, but it round here is a sensory overload as it is with houses, the pubs, the restaurants, everything that's around here, and the extra garden adding into that mix it does worry me quite considerably, that if I have to go to bed early because I've got a migraine, you know, and it's a day when Mr. Burton's garden is open to 10, gone 11 with customers, that I'm just not going to be able to get over my migraines and make myself better. I was supposed to be in hospital today, but it was cancelled. It just worries me so much that our life is going to be disrupted even more. The pub next door, you know, it changes hands and the garden gets very busy. The noise from there is some days unbearable. We have to leave our home, and it just worries me that being in our kitchen, being in our bedroom, being in our toilet, even just having people out there, it's just going to be too much. I'm sorry, I'm really sorry to be emotional about it, but it's just, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. So what I'm hearing is that there's already a lot of noise activity and nuisance in the area as it stands, and the real anxiety is that if Shea Burton is open and trading in the garden, you don't know what type of people are going to be there. You don't know how they're going to behave. Nobody does it at this point in time, and the concern is that it could just effectively be the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah, I'm sorry to get emotional.
No, that's absolutely fine. I completely understand, and I think, you know, in other spaces, if there are concerns around what existing businesses, licensed businesses, are doing in the area, you are able to utilize the licensing review process as well to tackle those things. You know, obviously trying to deal with things at first instance via the premises themselves, or with the police if there are incidents and they are causing issues.
I have tried all those. Yeah, sorry to interrupt. Yeah. We have tried all those sorts of things, and I think the pub is sort of, with its bands and live music, it is sort of just having it once a month and things like that. But when we have full stock and things like that, we have to leave our home because the noise is just unbearable, and my anxiety just won't cope with it, I'm afraid.
Yeah, no, I understand that. Okay, so I think we've taken some good points from that. So does either Mr. or Mrs. Burton have questions for Karen? I can see Mrs. Burton's raised her hand. So again, questions of fact. If there's sort of pastoral support and a holistic approach that you want to discuss and negotiate offline with residents, use that space to do it outside of this hearing. I want us to just focus on the facts and deal with the licensing application here.
Okay, I'm hoping I'm not speaking out of turn. The reason for us wanting to open the garden isn't to disrupt anyone's life or make it difficult. Karen, I am so sorry that you're going through all of this. Nobody wants that. The reason for us extending the premises to the garden was because, as Karen will know, we are generally oversubscribed, and we want to make sure that we can offer the Shea Burton experience, the opportunity to dine in our restaurant to more people, because that's the demand that we've got. We have got no intention of having live music. That's never going to happen. It's not big enough. We wouldn't want that. It's a very refined dining experience, which will be emulated within the garden as well as it is in the restaurant. You've been to the restaurant.
Okay, I'm going to cut things
Yeah, we can.
off because I'm not hearing a. I'm being very harsh there, aren't I? I'll stop that. I'm not hearing a question in this, Mrs. Burton. What I'm hearing actually is something that I'd like to hear sort of in closing statements. So if any members attending sort of want to come back on points that have been made, you've got the opportunity to make those closing statements. So make notes and hold on to it and make those representations there, because they're absolutely things that we want to hear. It's just that if I'm asking for questions, I want to hear a question.
Okay. No problem. Thank you.
So I don't think Mr. Burton had any specific questions for Karen. Do members of the panel have questions?
No, thanks.
No. Lovely. I've got a Marion Watts as well on my screen, but not on camera. Did you want to make any representations?
I'd just like to say I'm more than happy if Neil sticks to the point that the garden is cleared by 10 at night. Then we because we live at number 1, we're shielded by the other residents in the court from the pub noise. So you know, we at number 1 are more than happy if the garden is cleared by 10. We then don't have any other objections.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. I think that was an excellent and brief statement. Does either Mr. or Mrs. Burton have questions for Marion? No. Any members of the panel? No. And there isn't the opportunity for other persons to question each other, because obviously the assumption is largely that you're all generally in the same sort of boat, I think. I notice, however, that we've lost Mr. Taylor. So could I ask if we're able to try and reach out to him, please, officers, and see if we can get him back online, because I think he is a key person for these proceedings. And I'm just going to check what Louis said to me about what happens if we lose objectors or applicants.
So stall by 10 minutes.
I've got a stall by 10 minutes if we lose a member. In the event the applicant goes, we will adjourn until connection is restored. Responsible authorities, we can carry on potentially, but I've got nothing for objectors. So Nora Netta, do I need to wait until we've got Mr. Taylor back? Do I need an adjournment?
There's nothing in the in any of the prescribed procedures that sets out what to do with objectors. However, you are the chair, so you might be able to exercise some discretion. I'd probably say rather than 10, maybe 5 minutes, just to give him time. It might be that when Louis calls him, Louis will find out what the issue is, and it might be something that can be easily rectified.
I'm going to assume that we have got a phone number for Mr. Taylor and we can reach out to him and try and get him back. I need a confirmation from William or Louis.
Hi, I'm investigating at the moment.
Perfect. In that case, I'm going to propose, as Juanita suggested, we will adjourn for 5 minutes. I make it 11:29, which is an ugly number, so let's come back at 11:35.
Time to get a coffee.
You've got time to get a coffee if you run.
Okay, thank you.
Presumably the Zoom session will just stay open. I'll just hang on.
It will do, yes.
We'll hold it open, but if you want to turn your camera off, that's fine.
Nothing to hide behind it, so I'll just sit.
Alcohol stopped at 10. The back garden cleared by our past.
Right, I'm going to allow another few seconds before we start back, because it's not quite 35 past. And I do need Councillor Bloxham back on screen shortly. There he is. Excellent. Thank you very much. And very prompt at exactly 35 past. Perfect. Well, by my clock anyway. Okay, so we've been unable to reach Mr. Taylor. I've been informed that we don't have a contact number for him, unfortunately. And there is nothing in the procedures that govern this type of hearing, which means that we must wait for him to come back. If, of course, he does rejoin the hearing, you know, at some point while we're still carrying on, I will do my best to include him and make sure he's heard. And I will consider the points that he's made so far, as well as the submissions that are in his responses to the application. And of course, the subcommittee will give adequate weight to his representations when we go into deliberation. So where are we now? I think we've had all of the submissions from the other persons and everybody's had the opportunity to ask questions. So I will now bring us to closing statements. The first person I'm going to ask to give me their closing statement is Jasmine, our licensing officer.
Sorry, my unmute button wasn't working. Thank you, Chair. There is a right of appeal against the subcommittee's decision for any party to today's hearing. That appeal will be heard by the local magistrates court, which for this area is Stevenage. An appeal stating the grounds on which the decision is being appealed and accompanied by the appropriate court fee must be lodged with the clerk to the magistrates no longer than 21 days after receipt of the emailed decision notice. At any stage after the grant of the licence, a responsible authority or another person may request the licensing authority to review the licence if they believe one or more of the licensing objectives are not being met. The review is by way of application served on the licensing authority, the licence holder and the responsible authority.
Sorry to interrupt, Jasmine and Chair. Have we not heard Mr. Burton's final summation yet?
So Mr. Burton's final summation is going to come at the end. So the applicant gets the last say when we have these types of applications.
Apologise for interrupting.
That's fine.
No.
As you were, Jasmine.
Further details are available on the council's website. If the grounds for review are deemed valid, there will be a 28-day consultation period during which representations can be made, similar to the recent application process. A hearing similar to today will then be held where the subcommittee would have a number of options, including taking no action, amending timings or activities, suspending the licence or revoking the licence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And because these are closing statements, there are no questions. So I shall move to the other persons. We've lost Mr. Taylor. I think we've heard and can give adequate weight to his comments around noise and nuisance. So I will ask firstly, Karen Watts, if you'd like to give us your closing position.
Sorry, what exactly is it that is a closing position? Sorry.
That's fine. So basically, this is your opportunity just to sum up your perspective on sort of everything that you've heard, respond or sort of layer on any final details that you want us to take away before we go into our determination.
Essentially, I'm not overly happily. I appreciate that Mr. and Mrs. Burton want to expand their business into the garden, but I feel that there does need to be a strict time of when it ends, a strict time of what days it's going to be open, because this isn't our business, this is our homes, this is where we live, and that really needs to be taken into consideration, that our health and well-being is far more important than a business. And as much as Mr. Burton has made it sound wonderful, it's us that have to live with it. And, we live in Baldock, we've lived here for a long time. And I just appreciate it if everyone could just hear appreciate what we have to say, take into consideration our feelings and our well-being. And yeah, I would just want some definite clarification so that we can all hopefully get on, that we don't have to appeal, that we don't, that people won't be in the garden till 11 o'clock during working hours and that sort of thing. It's vitally important that we just, keep everyone happy, really. I think that's what I'd like us to see. Sorry, I'm just mumbling now, but yeah, it's just, I just want everyone to take into consideration the residents, our feelings, and, as I say, have some set boundaries as to what is allowed to happen. And yeah, sorry, I don't quite know how to word it. I get very emotional. I do apologise.
No, that's absolutely fine. And I think in a way it can be harder doing these things online as well rather than in person, because you're just talking to yourself on a screen and you're not in the room, so you lose a lot of those cues that you usually get from people. But I think you've made excellent points, and we've taken note of that, and we'll take it away. So thank you.
Thank you.
Lovely. Marion, did you want to make a closing statement?
I think I said everything just a little while ago, that I've nothing more to add.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. So next I will come to the applicant and ask if they would like to make their final submissions. Shall I go to Neil first, and then Jacqueline, if you have anything to add on behalf of the applicant, you can do that after.
Okay, happy to. In terms of, we've heard a lot on this, in terms of sort of summarising the closing statement. I think point number one, the licensing objections to our application seem to be largely relate to the comparisons of us to others. Clearly, Karen's experience of other pubs or other restaurants in the area has pushed the residents to a breaking point, which I don't necessarily think is fair when you're judging our application. Even yourself, Chair, used the term "the straw that breaks the camel's back." The fact that there has been issues with other premises and other licensed premises in the area, I would hope that the residents and the council would take that up with them. If there's any boundaries to be set, I would expect the boundaries to be set by the people that are causing the most problem. So that is one closing point. The second closing point, I think that through naivety and not knowing the process, we have painted ourselves into a corner with regards to licensing hours. The point that Mike made around having a restaurant that is open to the garden up until 11 o'clock doesn't need a license. If I wasn't serving alcohol, I could happily sit in the garden and serve people food. I think we have almost painted ourselves into a corner, given the advice from the legal representative, that we've drawn ourselves a a hard line on this middle point, this middle option of 10 o'clock, everyone's out, which means 9 o'clock, I can't serve alcohol because people are going to be hanging on to their bottle of wine. I think through naivety that has not helped us, and the lessons learned there. I don't expect to ever apply for a license again, but I think lessons learned there. I would ask the council to grant the application as I originally submitted it, rather than the compromised position. But I leave that up to you. And they're my 2 points. Honey, Honey, I'm meaning my wife and not you, Chair. I'll pass if Jackie, if you've got any other comments.
I just hopefully I can alleviate any issues with, and it is all going to be hypothetical because we don't know how firstly the weather conditions. It is going to be weather permitted, so we could be open 1 day in a year, we could be open 20 days in a year, we could be open 4 months of the year in the garden. It is going to be weather permitting because no one wants to sit out in the rain, and we are in England after all. So that's a difficult decision to kind of pass judgment on. Noise-wise, we're not noisy. We're not a noisy restaurant. People who come into the restaurant don't leave noisily. They leave quietly. There is certain kind of clientele that we and a demographic that we aim for. That will continue within the garden area. But you know, we sell cocktails, we sell expensive wines, we sell expensive food. It's not a draft pub, beer, garden. People won't be coming in just to drink. There will be, it's still a restaurant, so they will be expected to eat and drink. We don't do meal deals, we don't do buy one, get one free or anything like that. So it is restricted to a certain kind of clientele, that they're not a rowdy bunch. And from the last 7 months that we've been open, we've never had that experience. That's really that if that can alleviate the noise issue, I don't really know what else to say. We're trying to be as compliant as possible with neighbours. We don't want to offend or affect anyone's lifestyle. We both work full time and we have to get up early, and we are there every evening, and we restrict, and we will continue to restrict to make sure that we don't have rowdy people in there, and if they will be politely asked to leave if they are. We've never had that in the past, so I'm hoping it will never happen in the future. I don't really know what else to say. I'm kind of like with Neil and Karen, we're all very new to this, and it's all very emotional. Shea Burton's our baby. It's something that we're very passionate about, and we were very passionate about how we are perceived. And I think from the clientele that we've had in up to now, and I guess that it's been well received, and it's exactly how we wanted it to be. I think that's probably it from me. Sorry.
Okay, no, that's absolutely fine. Thank you very much. That was quite helpful. So next I will ask our legal advisor for their final summary.
Thank you, Chair. So members have read the report, and they've also heard representations from the applicant and others. Just to remind those present, during the deliberations that the subcommittee will go into now, they will consider the application as submitted, including the agreed conditions proposed by the applicant. And they can either approve it as been submitted, approve it with additional conditions, or refuse. The main licensing objectives that will be under consideration for this application will be the two relating to prevention of crime and disorder and prevention of public nuisance. Obviously, I'll be there to assist with anything further, but those are my closing statement and submissions.
Lovely, thank you very much. And before we move into deliberation, members of the panel have the opportunity to ask questions of the legal advisor. So before we do that, do Mike or Simon have any queries for Nora Netta?
No, thanks.
No? Mike?
No, thanks. I think I've already asked mine.
Lovely, excellent. Right. In that case, I now need to adjourn the hearing, and we will retire into a Zoom breakout room, which is very grand, to deliberate, and then we will return to this space when we are ready. to make our decision. Members of the public and the applicant can obviously stay online. If you turn your camera and your microphones off when we come back, you'll hopefully be aware of it and you'll be able to hear it. But equally, we will be publishing the decision as soon as we're able to as well, and it will be sent to you. So I'd like to invite our committee member and scrutiny officer to explain formally the next part of this process.
Thanks, Chair. The subcommittee will now be retiring to make a decision in private. Public viewing the meeting are welcome to wait to listen to the decision. However, this might take some time. Once the subcommittee has made its decision, this will be announced via the live stream. If members believe that the decision will take too long, to avoid parties waiting, they may decide not to announce the decision live today. If this is the case, an announcement will be made to this effect by the subcommittee and the meeting will be closed. The decision would then be announced in writing within 5 working days of the meeting. Members and officers will shortly be receiving an invitation to a breakout room. The applicants may stay or leave if they wish. A hold notice will be displayed in the Zoom call and the live stream will continue. Please note that as the live stream is ongoing, anything said during this time will be recorded. Will, if you'd like to start the breakout room.
Right, I think if we've got everybody back, Louis, can you take down the holding screen for me? Thank you. And I'll just check and confirm the live stream is on.
Yes, we're still live.
Excellent, thank you very much. And thank you everyone who's waited while we've been in deliberations. So we've reached an outcome on this application. I'll make sure I've got the right version open. Yes. Okay, and what I will do is I'll read through the decision note and provide any additional guidance outside of that that I feel is relevant or that people need to hear. So the date of this hearing is Friday, the 8th of April, 2022. And the members of the panel today are Councillors Simon Bloxham, myself, Elizabeth Dennis Harburg, Mike Rice, and our reserve member was Jean Green. The licence holder for Shea Burton is Neil Burton, and the premises address is Shea Burton, 48 High Street, Baldock, Hertfordshire, SG7 6BJ. The date of this application was the 3rd of February 2022. Now, this is an application for a variation of an existing premises licence under Section 34 of the Licensing Act 2003. The subcommittee has read the material presented to it and has listened to all of the evidence and submissions, and the subcommittee's considered the national guidance and the statement of licensing policy and has come to the following decision. The subcommittee has decided to grant the application as applied for, and the outdoor area now forms part of the licence plan attached to the licence. Now, I'm going to clarify a couple of little bits around that shortly. The licensable activities and timings are and conditions of the existing premises licence have remained unchanged. So bear in mind that when this application was brought to this committee, there were conditions that the applicant had agreed in advance following representations from residents. Those conditions now form a part of this licence. So the following operation schedule conditions were offered as part of the application, therefore will be included within the licence. And those two conditions are: the premises licence holder will ensure that the outdoor area is not used by patrons after 2200 hours and that it will be cleared of patrons by that time. So we discussed during the course of the hearing the meaning of used by and cleared. So at 10 o'clock, the licence condition is clear. The outdoor area will no longer be used by patrons of Shea Burton. The second condition that was offered and has been accepted onto the schedule by this committee is the premises licence holder will ensure that there is a separate unimpeded access to flat 1D that will not form part of the outdoor area used under the premises licence. Okay, the subcommittee recognises that conditions will only be imposed on a licence where conditions are appropriate for the promotion of one of the 4 licensing objectives, and the subcommittee will only impose conditions on a licence where relevant representations have been made and it considers that it is appropriate to impose conditions as a result of these representations. Now, we did consider, as well as the conditions that were previously agreed, a number of other potential options and consider conditions based on the arguments that have been made by those making representations today. However, at this point in time, we didn't feel that there was sufficient evidence that imposing those conditions would be a reasonable way of achieving the licensing objectives. However, as members of this hearing will know, there is a right of appeal in future, and so that means that those conditions might be looked at and variations to the licence might be agreed at some point in the future. The following conditions are each considered appropriate by the subcommittee to promote licensing objective of prevention of public nuisance, and those conditions are the ones that I just read out above about the garden no longer being used beyond 10 p.m. and the access to flat 1D. The effect of failing to comply with conditions is that the licence or certificate, I will read that properly instead of trying to put it in normal words. The effect of failure to comply with any of the conditions attached to the licence or certificate is a criminal offence, which upon conviction could result in an unlimited fine up to 6 months imprisonment or both. We've considered a lot of different statutory guidance and also our licensing policy. I won't read out the different sections or the policy consideration numbers, but they are listed in the decision note if people wish to cross-reference those. This is the most important bit and sort of forms the bulk of what we consider when we go into deliberations. This is our rationale for the decision. So there were 3 sort of key points that we considered when thinking about granting this licence as it stands, and that is the subcommittee were mindful of the council's statement of licensing policy, and in particular paragraph B9, which states that in making a balanced decision, the council accepts that those living in town centre environments are likely to experience a degree of disturbance associated with a vibrant nighttime economy, but this must be managed in such a way to limit its impact beyond that which is reasonable. However, the subcommittee were encouraged by the fact that the applicant had engaged in early discussions with the responsible authorities in advance of the hearing and had agreed to additional conditions which satisfied the subcommittee that the licence was capable of operating without putting the 4 licensing objectives at risk. Now, of course, if there is a situation which occurs as a direct consequence of Shea Burton trading and operating in the garden, residents absolutely have the right to ask for this licence to be reviewed, and further action can be taken at that point in time. What this means is that at the moment, we did not feel when we were deliberating that there was sufficient evidence to show that Shea Burton's request and the conditions that had already been submitted didn't go far enough in preventing nuisance. We felt that at the moment we're comfortable with this. However, having listened to all of the representations made during the course of the hearing, it's apparent to the subcommittee that the main concern expressed by the objectors was around the later end of hours during which licensable activities could take place, and it's therefore felt appropriate in order to promote the licensing objectives, particularly the prevention of crime and disorder and the prevention of public nuisance, that the hours should be reduced as outlined in the above in relation to the outdoor areas. So that kind of goes to the heart of what Mr. Burton said about concerns that having everybody out by 10 o'clock curtails the business or whatever. We've had to tread that fine line and balance between potentially increased nuisance to residents, but also giving the premises the ability to trade and effectively to test a new way of doing business. And we think that the condition that was accepted before this hearing was appropriate. And equally, as the residents can review, you have the right at some point in future to vary your licence and to come back to this place if that's what you so wish to do. On the matter of noise, the subcommittee were also mindful of the possibility of disturbance being caused by persons using the outdoor area, as the surrounding area is a high street and as such is mixed use in nature. It therefore felt it is appropriate to restrict the times of operation as previously outlined. And I think we've discussed the interaction of different premises adequately during the course of the hearing, and the steps that residents can take if there are concerns in respect of any of those. The commencement date of this decision is now. It takes immediate effect. Rights of appeal. An appeal may be made against this decision by the holder of the premises licence or any person that made a relevant representation in relation to the application. So it's anyone who's made a relevant representation, whether they're here or not. So equally, Mr. Taylor, who dropped out partway through, has the ability to raise an objection at some point in future should he wish. The appeal and appeal fee must be lodged with the clerk to Stevenage Magistrates Court no later than 21 days after the day on which the parties were notified by the licensing authority of this decision. And at any stage following the grant of a premises licence, a responsible authority such as the police or any other person, such as a resident affected by licensable activities at the premises, may apply for the licensing authority to review the licence because of a matter arising at the premises in connection with any of the 4 licensing objectives. The review is a request for the council to look at the existing licence and decide whether its conditions are adequate to meet the 4 licensing objectives defined under the Licensing Act 2003. That brings the proceedings today to a close. The decision notice will be published and circulated to everyone shortly as well by officers here. I just wish to thank everyone for the time and commitment and patience. I know that you're not all familiar with doing these kinds of things online, and it can be a little bit different and odd and difficult to deal with. And I wish you all well. I think that's everything. We can take things offline, please, officers.
Thank you.